All right, everybody. We're going to talk about light today, and I'm going to tell you guys how to create a cast shadow, how color affects light, and all kinds of wonderful things. So let's get started. Try to make this video really quick. All right, check it out. We have a nice space here. We have a red cube, and we have a light source. You can see this light source floating around up here in my 3D space in Blender. If I move it around, you can see it totally moves and changes the direction of our cast shadow, as well as the way that the cube is lit. It's sort of representing like a 100-watt light bulb, and so that's how we can kind of imagine it in this room, one of those like creepy swinging ones in those interrogation chambers. Anyway, so we got to talk about how to render, how to make things look realistic, and that's caused by a few different kinds of things, and that's shadows. One of is a value shadow or a form shadow. It's shadows that are on the form. One's a cast shadow. It's the shadow that is made by the absence of light. And then we have a contact shadow. It's this really, really dark line right here that shows us that something is nearly touching something else. You need those three shadows to really make something feel realistically lit in space. So form shadows are simple. It's planes that are facing a light source. See how this one's kind of aimed at that direction, are going to get the most intense light. If they're angled slightly away, they're going to get less intense light. And then the ones that are aimed completely away are not going to get as much light at all. And the reason this has any light, and the reason you can see any of the red and it's not completely black, is because light is hitting the ground here and it's reflecting in all kinds of different directions, and it's hitting this side of our object here. If this space had no power to reflect light at all, then this would be pure black. That's why if you guys look in space, like pictures of like astronauts in space, there's no shadows, there's no reflected light in the shadows, it's all just black, and it's because there's nothing reflecting light back into those shadows. So that's the form shadow. The next one is our cast shadow, and cast shadows are the challenging part that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, and that's because it requires an understanding of perspective. So I'm going to walk you guys through how to figure out how to place a cast shadow and what you need for it to make sense. All right, so let's see, what are the parts that we need for this to make sense? We need two things. We need a light source, which is our cool little 100-watt light bulb hanging out in the sky, and then we need to know where it is in our perspective grid. How we do that is we use something called the station line. That's what this cool line is right here, the one that's kind of hanging out here, and it stops right here. That is telling us that if there was like a cool little like beam or string that hung down, it would hit this part of our ground. And you can see we have a perspective grid here. It's sitting in that little box. All right. And what's nice is you can see that spot, and then you can compare it to where it is with our cube. So it looks like it's sitting like somewhere like right in the middle. They're all kind of next to each other in this little room. Now, we need this part and we need this part. Why? Because we need these parts to tell us where the corners of our cast shadows are going to be. So let's just figure this out. Let's figure out where it is. And I'm going to start with the easiest, most obvious point, okay? The light source. To figure out where light is going to hit some part of the ground, we need to draw lights from this point here, and we need to figure out if they either hit our object or miss our object. Now you're not going to just draw like 1,000 light beams kind of shooting off and then like seeing if they hit or aim. You just need to understand the corners of your object, okay? So we have a corner here, we have an edge, and then we have a corner, okay? So light's going to emit, and then it's going to eventually get to a point where it misses, okay? So it's going to swing past this edge, and then it's going to hit the ground over here. Now I don't need to know where it hits the edge, I just need to know where it hits the corners. So if I go over here and I start drawing these beams hitting the corner, it's going to hit the corner but miss it. It's going to keep going, and you can see it intersects with that little corner right here, okay? I'm going to keep drawing that beam going out a little ways though, because I don't know exactly where it's going to land. The next line, I'm going to do this little one here. It's going to sort of look like it goes in the same direction, but it's going to go past, and it's going to hit this little corner here. Let me actually change the light source so it makes it a bit more simple to understand. Let me move it just a tiny bit so that it doesn't, because you can see like those lines were sort of interacting with each other, and I don't like that. So let's see. Let's move it. I'm going to grab it, change it to like right about, we'll go like right there. I think that's a bit more, or we'll go there, nice and high. Okay, so I'm going to draw it again. I'm going to go from this point, and I'm going to draw through the box, and I'm going to see if I can get it past it. So I'm going to draw, make a straight line. Draw, and keep going. Draw, and keep going. And then draw, and come on, stop. Draw that corner too. Keep going. So this is going to take a little bit of a precise line. I'm not doing it because I'm, this Blender doesn't have precise drawing. That's easy. I have to go in a whole bunch of like menus to figure it out, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. So I've established where the lines are hitting in the corners, and I've drawn them through. But now I want to figure out where they're going to hit the ground, because we know that they're casting this sort of shape, but it doesn't tell us where it's hitting the ground. And that's where we need the station point, because the station point is going to help us map that out. Okay, so this is our flat plane, our flat ground, and a station point is going to interact with these corners on the bottom. And if I draw through sort of this cube, if I use the perspective grid that is presented to us, doing a little bit of kind of guess work here, it's probably where it's going to be. Oh no, that's off. That's off a lot. There we go. We can see through in our view. It's like right about there, yeah? Okay, so I'm going to draw from this corner, from this station point, and I'm going to keep going past it, and look at that. The corner of the shadow is meeting with the light source's line. And if you look here, this is just a nice big triangle, and that's all it is. Let's do the second one. Let's hit this one right here. I'm going to draw from this point, try to hit it, and then I'm going to go right past it, and look at that. We hit this corner of shadow. And then finally, I'm going to try to make sure I've drawn through my box. I'm going to draw through, try to hit that corner, and boom, I hit the shadow there. So there's a logic to this. It's a simple logic. You just have to know where things are in perspective. And this is why people find drawing shadows like this so challenging. And that's because it requires an understanding of perspective. And you guys can do this. You learned perspective. I've seen everybody do a pretty decent job with it. And it takes a little bit of work. So that's why I think for this project, you guys should limit yourself to 1 or 2 light sources. And so that brings us to our next part. Like, what happens if you have multiple light sources? Well, pretty simple. It's the same thing. You just have to have multiple triangles, multiple cast lights, okay? But shadows interact with each other. And if you guys are going to draw and paint those shadows, we have to talk about it. So I'm going to turn on a second light source, and there we go. We have 2 light sources now, and we have 2 cast shadows. You can see the cast shadows have gotten lighter, and that's because the light is coming out of here and it's hitting this spot. And you can see that there's like a lighter area here, and that's because it's got 2 areas of light hitting it. And so light hitting, multiple light sources hitting the same area are going to brighten it significantly. Okay. What happens if a light is a different color? Let's say you have a green light. I'm going to change the light of the original source, make it green, and look at that. It is now creating a color change. Oops, didn't want that. Now it's creating a color change on our object. You can see that the one that's facing this angle the most is getting the most color, and everything else is getting a tiny bit of it. But the biggest, most obvious change is the shadow. Do you see how the shadow here is very green now? And that's because it's only getting light from this green light source. This area over here is sort of a mix. It's got this kind of white light and this green light hitting it, and it's a little lighter. But this is more obvious. If I change the color here to like a blue or a purple, now check it out. You can see that this here is getting the most light from this. This shadow is now a blue color, even though this shadow right here, this shadow is this light source's shadow. right? This shadow belongs to that light source. It is getting light from this light, and so it's going to be the color of this light source. Crazy confusing, I know, but it's logic. It's how this makes sense. And then of course, if you look at this area where the lights are mixing, it's a turquoise. What happens when you mix green and blue, you get turquoise, right? So just remember, a light is going to emit a bunch of beams. If light is hitting the shadow of another light source, it's going to turn that light the color of the light source. If an angle of an object is really aimed at a light source, it's going to take on the color of that object. If it's sort of aimed in the same direction, it's going to mix, so you're going to get like, you know, a little bit of green and red that's going to make a gray, and then you get a nice, cool color design. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is the sun. Now, you guys are doing interiors right now, so you're not going to really deal with sunlight. But I wanted to make sure you understood and that there was a sense of logic behind, you know, how to make sense of everything. So these light sources are just light bulbs hanging in a room. They're emitting light. They're really small. They're emitting in all directions. But what happens when you have a light source that's really, really, really far away? So this is now our sunlight. Okay, this is mimicking something that is millions of miles away. And just to make sure it's easy for us to figure out, the light source is going to start from this corner, and it's going to fall and hit a spot. All you guys need to do is figure out where you want it to hit on the ground. You draw your little triangle, okay? And this angle is going to be consistent with every single angle. It's going to be the same distance and the same angle. It's going to be the same little triangle on all points. So you can literally just redraw that same angle. And that's because it's so far away, it's not going to create a spread. It's just going to be a straight line, basically. That being said, these angles are still going to be subject to sunlight. Okay, so if our object, let me go and allow us to move the cube real quick. If I move this cube here, you can see that there we go. You can see that the angles stay consistent, but the direction that the cast shadow is going to go is going to slightly change based on the perspective. Okay, so you can see like over here, this line is falling towards that light source. If I move it over here, or sorry, not light source, vanishing point. If I move it over here, it's going in that direction of the vanishing point, and it's following that perspective grid's logic. So we always have to make sure it makes sense. If we rotate this cube, that light logic is still going to make the same sense. We're still going to follow the light source, okay, which is coming from up there. It's going to hit the ground, probably somewhere over there, and the angle at which we're going to approach this at is always going to be the same. So the same direction that the triangle is going to go. All right. Now, I think that's about it. Turn my light source. We move the cube back over to the spot. We do another little example of drawing that. Real quick, just to make sure everybody understands. Let's move this light source sort of onto this side. What if the light source actually hits a wall? This will make a little more sense when we do this. I'm going to put this up here, like this. So it's casting against the wall over here a little bit. Maybe we'll move this over a little closer to it, and then we'll move the light source a little closer to it too. All right, so we've got the cast shadow doing this kind of thing. We need to figure out why it's doing that. It's going up this wall, and we know that the wall is vertical because the wall is vertical, right? So our space is doing something like that. I'm going to draw from the two positions, the station point and the light source, and I'm going to try to hit my corners. So draw from here, go straight, hit the corner, and I'm going to hit the wall. I need to map out a little bit of the verticality of the wall to make sense for this. Okay, so I'm going to go and I'm going to go past, and I'm going to keep going. I'm going to try to hit something. way over here. Okay, now I need to figure out where it's going to hit on the wall. If I draw the little bottom corner, the one that's adjacent to this one, past it, it's going to try to make my shadow go somewhere past the wall, somewhere way over here that, you know, is not where I'm trying to get it to be. I want it to be, you know, hitting this wall source. So if I draw like this, you can see it's going well past the wall. It doesn't make sense, okay? But if we look here, if we look at where the wall ends, if I draw a straight line up from it, you can see that the corner of our shadow is hitting at that spot. See these two areas? So we're making less of a triangle and more of like a flag. There's, you know, this little section here. Like this. All right? Now, see how this goes like this and goes like this? That is going to happen because our shadow's continually trying to go past this wall, okay? So if I draw from this corner, this follows the simple logic that we learned earlier. We draw the triangle, oops, hitting the corner, boom. I gotta make sure I remember, or I know that that's hitting some spot behind that wall. That's kind of where it was before, right? I'm gonna connect this corner here, and I'm going to follow the same rules, but then now you can see where we draw that part of the wall. This little section here interacts with that corner, and that gives us that weird funky angle that light was gonna make, all right? So lots of information, really complicated, but still pretty important, okay? If you guys need help with this, obviously my job is to be there to help you understand it all, and I will do so. And that's it for this video, okay? Thanks for your time, bye.